begin a new Perek today, the Mishnah, the fourth Perek, the last Perek of Masechta Megillah. Zog Heilige Mishnah. B'nei ha'ir shemachru rechayva shalir. People of a city that sold the rechayva shalir, it's the center of the city where there's a big street, and this is a place, as we'll see in the Gemara, that was used sometimes to daven there. And then the people of the city sold this off to a private person. So this is a place that has kedusha in it. So the money that they got for this place, loichim bedama of Beis HaKnesses, they can use this money to buy something that's a higher level of kedusha, which is to buy a shul. Beis HaKnesses, if they had to sell off a shul, what do they do with that money? Loichim teva, they can use the money to buy a teva, which is Aron Kodesh. Teva, if you had to sell the Aron Kodesh, loichim mitpachis, you can buy a mantle for the Sefer Torah itself. Mitpachais, if you have to sell the mantle of the Sefer Torah, then yikchu sfarim. You can buy with this sfarim. Rashi says it refers to the sfarim of Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Sfarim, if you had to sell Nevi'im and Ksuvim, loichim Torah. So with this you buy a Sefer Torah itself. So what's the point of everything that it says here in the Mishnah? That Mailam B'Kodesh v'loi meridin. Wait 1 second. Okay. Mailam B'Kodesh v'loi meridin. We always have to go up and not down. And Rashi here actually brings the source of this concept of Mailam B'Kodesh v'loi meridin. Where do you find this? By the building of the Mishkan. Who built the Mishkan? Betzalel. Who erected the Mishkan? Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Why? Because you have to go up from Betzalel to Moshe Rabbeinu. And v'loi meridin, Rashi also brings a source for that part, because you see by Kairach, when they had the pans that they were used for ketores, and they were wondering what's going to be done with it afterwards. So the Eibusha tells Moshe Rabbeinu that once it was already sanctified, they should be used in the Beis HaMikdash for the Mizbeach, to plate the Mizbeach, but you shouldn't go down a level with it. So you see over here this concept, Mailam HaKodesh v'loi meridin, and some even say, based on what Rashi says here, that this concept is min ha-Torah, because it's learned out from these psukim. Mishnah continues, Avlo machru Torah lo yichu svarim. If they had to sell the Sefer Torah, should not buy svarim with it, going down a level. Svarim, if they sold the svarim, lo yichu mitpachis. They should not buy mitpachis, a mantle from the Sefer Torah. Mitpachis, if they had to sell the mantle of the Sefer Torah, lo yichu teva. They should not buy an Aron Kodesh. Teva, lo yichu Beis HaKnesses. If they had to sell the Aron Kodesh, they should not buy a shul with this money. Beis HaKnesses, if they had to sell the shul, they should not buy back this area of a city that's going to be used to daven in it outdoors, which is a lower level of kedusha than the shul itself. This halacha here, that the money that you get for any of these holy things has to be used for something higher, is even if, let's say, you sold the teva and you buy with it mitpachis, and then you have extra money. So you might say, I already used part of the money for something that's holier. So the leftover money I could use for something else. So the Mishnah says no. Any of the money, including any of the leftover money, you have to use it for something that's holier than what it was originally. Some Rishonim discussed over here in the Mishnah, the Baal HaMaor here brings, that what's going to be the din if I want to buy something that's the same. The Mishnah talks about Mailam B'Kodesh v'loi meridin. What's if I sell one Sefer Torah in order to buy another Sefer Torah, and so on? Something that's on the same level. Is that allowed? So it's not clear in the Mishnah, because in the first half of the Mishnah it talks about that you have to always buy something that's more holy. Then in the second half of the Mishnah it says don't buy something which is less. So what's if it's something that's equal? So the Rishonim B'Payel say that you should not buy something which is the same. You have to buy something which is holier. The same would not be enough. In other words, the diak of the first part of the Mishnah, but not the second part of the Mishnah. Zok the Gemara, what did it say in the Mishnah? People that sold this street in the city that was used for davening. So what's the inyan over here? So this that the Mishnah says here, that because it has kedusha, so you should not use the money to buy anything other than the shul that's holier. This is the opinion of Rabbi Menachem Bar Yosi. The Chachamim disagree with this, and they say this place in the center of the city that they would use to daven there, it has no kedusha in it. This halacha does not apply. So the Gemara now explains that l'chayre Rabbanan are right. After all, it's a city, it's outdoors, so it's part of it. So it's just a street in the city. Could be people daven there, but nevertheless, isn't it just a street in the city? So Rabbi Menachem Bar Yosi, my time, why does he say that it has kedusha in it? V'hayil, reason is, since v'ha'am mispalim by b'tainiyos. The people daven over there in certain times when they have to fast. The Gemara explains this in Masechta Tainis, that when it comes to a certain point, when they're fasting for rain and the rain still doesn't come, there's different categories of fast. It comes to a certain point where they have to fast and they have to take Daran Kodesh out into the city, into the street of the city that is, and they daven outdoors over there in a certain designated place. So because it's used by such a kind of time of tiniest to daven in this place, so it has Kedusha. Similar, the Gemara says, Ubema'amadais. There's Ma'amadais, which is the Yidden that are representatives that you'd gather in cities at the times for the Karbanis. So they were the representatives of Klal Yisrael. They had a special tefillah they davened and special Kriyas HaTorah that they did. So this was also done outdoors in the city. And therefore, it sanctifies that area where they would daven. So therefore, Rabbi Nachman Bar Yossi says it has Kedusha. Rashi actually says you should take out the word Ma'amadais, because Ma'amadais is something that happens only very, very, very seldomly. It happens once or twice a year. It's something that's not kavua at all. Tiniest is considered to be more kavua, and therefore Rashi takes out this word. The Rabbanon say, Ahu akroi ba'alma, that the tiniest or Ma'amadais, whatever it is, it's still all considered to be temporary. It doesn't establish this place to become a place that's actually holy like a shul. Sometimes, in extreme circumstances, they go and they daven over there out in the city. But that's not enough of a reason to make this place holy enough that you can only use the money for something holier than this. Beis HaKnesses. Yeah. Okay, but it was a designated area that sometimes was used. So the question is whether that sometimes is good enough to say that it has Kedusha in it. Beis HaKnesses like Chenteva, if you sell a shul, so then you buy with it an Aron Kodesh. This is only true that you can sell a shul if it's a shul that is in a village. But if it's a shul that's in a big city, since many people are traveling and come to the city, there are all kinds of guests and that come into this shul, they can't sell this shul at all, because this shul does not belong to just the people here in the city, the members of the shul specifically here, but it belongs to everybody that comes to the shul. So Rashi says that the point is the bailos, the ownership. You can't really say that there's anybody that owns this shul. This shul is owned by everybody that comes to this shul. It's a city, it's an open place, and everybody comes there. On the other hand, Taisva says that the pshat is when you get to the kedusha of the shul, that because this is a place that everybody comes to this shul, the kedusha of the shul is much stronger than a shul that's sort of private, that's just for people in a village that are the members of the shul. And because of this high level of kedusha, you're not allowed to sell it. Ravashi said, "Hi beknishta de Masa Machasya." There was this shul in the city of Masa Machasya. Afal gav de ma'alma asula, even though people from all over come to it. But kiven da adaita didika asu, why is everyone coming here to this shul? It's all for me, to learn Torah for me, for my sake. So therefore, the shul is still his. It's his. It's Rav Ashi's shul, and therefore beinem is avninale. If I wish, I would be able to sell this shul. So there is sometimes a situation you have a shul that's, for example, even today you have a shul. It could be it's a big city, but there's a rav there that everyone's coming there to the shul just for him, for his sake. It's not just an open shul where people come and go. So then he has sort of the ownership or the rights to this shul, and if he wants, if he needs, he can sell it. Meisvei, so the Gemara asks about this in here, that a shul in a big city, so you can't sell. Rav Yehuda said, Maisa bebeis hakneses shel Tursiim. There was a story with a beis hakneses of Tursiim. So Tursiim are people that work with copper. Shahaya b'Yerushalayim. So this shul was for these people which had this profession, so they made a shul for themselves. Shemachrua, Rabbi Eliezer, they sold it to Rabbi Eliezer. They sold it to him to use for his own private needs. In fact, the Gemara, so how do they sell the shul? Well, he's speaking here about Yerushalayim, which is a big city. And if it's a big city, didn't we just say that you can't sell a shul in a big city? Answers the Gemara, Hahi beknishte zutta have. This is a shul, which is a small shul that has a small membership of just people that were coppersmiths, and therefore, even though it's in a large city, it's not this shul that's open that everybody comes to it, and therefore, the inu of dua, they made this shul for themselves, so even in a large city, they're allowed to sell this shul. Right? So, for example, like in a place like in Brooklyn, so you have different types of shuls. You have shuls that have, it's like a big city, but you have smaller shuls, or that's people from the block that have there, and so on. Then you have a shul like 770, which is open and everybody comes there. That's the kind of shul that you can't sell, that belongs to the rabbin. Gemara now asks another question also from the city of Yerushalayim. And the Gemara here brings a brayso that speaks about the halacha of negat tzaras. Meisvei, the question was asked, bebeis eretz achuzaschem. So when the Torah speaks about if a nega appears on the walls of your house, what does the Torah say? In the house, in the land that you will inherit. What does this mean? Achuzaschem mitame. Only a portion in Eretz Yisrael, which was divided, the territory was divided for the Shvatim to be as an inheritance for them. There, the nega tzaras is mitame, b'negoyim. But ve'ein Yerushalayim mitame b'negoyim. But in Yerushalayim there is no tumah for negoyim, and the reason is, as the Gemara will soon explain, because Yerushalayim is a city that was not divided for Shvatim. It belongs to all the Klal Yisrael. So therefore it's not achuzaschem. It's not a specific inheritance for one shevet. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, and he says, Ani lo shamaiti, I didn't hear this exclusion that there's an area where there's no negat tzaras, ela makom mikdash b'lvad, only the Beis HaMikdash. As Rashi here brings, and he learns it from a different pasuk, because it says in the pasuk, uva asher loy habayis, that negat tzaras is only asher loy habayis, a place which is privately owned. The Beis HaMikdash is not a place which is privately owned. Beis HaMikdash belongs to it's the Kodesh. It's a holy place. It's not a private place. It's not a place of chayil that's owned by a person. It's Kodesh. But the rest of Yerushalayim, what does Rabbi Yehuda hold? There is an union of negat tzaras, because as the Gemara will soon explain, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that Yerushalayim was divided for the Shvatim. It is eretz achuzaschem. So now, how is this relevant to our union over here, b'negei to a shul? So Elam. Where am I? So Dr. Gemara, ha batik nisiyas batim midrashes. What we understand from what Rabbi Yehuda said is all the batik nisiyas and batim midrashes, the shuls that are in Yerushalayim, mitamin, they could become tummy with a negat tzaras. The question is, but why? Amai hadikrachin havu, aren't these shuls that are in large cities? So if they're shuls in large cities, so it's not a shul that belongs to any individual. It's a shul that belongs to everybody. So how can you say that it's eretz achuzaschem, that it's something that belongs to one person? And says the Gemara, Eime, so you have to change the words that Rabbi Yehuda said. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, Ani lo shamaiti ela makai mekudesh bilvad. That I only heard regarding not only the Beis HaMikdash, but only the holy places in the city of Yerushalayim, including all the shuls, that they do not have the halacha of negat tzaras. Not only b'negei to the Beis HaMikdash. Because like we said before, a shul belongs to the rabbim. So now that the Gemara brought up this machlokes here, the Gemara will explain it. What's the argument over here between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama regarding the status of the city of Yerushalayim? Tanakama's opinion is Yerushalayim is a place that was not divided for the Shvatim. So therefore there's no negat tzaras in the entire city. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is Yerushalayim was divided for the Shvatim, as the Gemara will now bring a brayso here to explain which Shvatim had a territory in Yerushalayim, and therefore there is a negat tzaras in Yerushalayim, only not in the shuls or Beis HaMikdash. They're arguing the same machlokes as the following two braysos that you see the Tanoim argued about this. The Tanya, in one brayso we learned, and here this brayso speaks about the Beis HaMikdash itself. And in whose territory was the Beis HaMikdash? Which Shvatim? So the brayso says, what part of the Beis HaMikdash? Wasn't the portion of Yehuda, the Harabayis, Halishkais, so the Harabayis is on the east side of the Beis HaMikdash. So there's the Harabayis, and then going further west, you go to the Lishkais, there are different chambers over there, the Ha'azarais, and then the Azarais. There are three different types of Azarais. There's the Ezras Noshim, then there's the Ezras Yisrael, and then there's the Ezras Kainim. There's another 11 Amos where the Yidden are not allowed to go there. All of that, up until the Mizbeach basically, is the territory of Yehuda. Okay, that's on one hand. And then, Umahaya Bechelka Yishol Binyamin. What was in the portion of Binyamin? Ulam v'Heichel, starting with the structure of the Beis HaMikdash itself, which is the Ulam and the Heichel, and also Beis Kodesh Kadashim. And also the Kodesh Kadashim was in the Chelik of Binyamin. So the Gemara here, the Brayse, until this point, explained the Chelik of Yehuda, starting from the west, and then the Chelik of Binyamin, which was further in, going again. Yehuda was on the east side of the Beis HaMikdash, and the Chelik of Binyamin is further in, all the way to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is going further west, might have all the way to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. But there's a spot in between that the Gemara that the Brayse did not explain. The spot of the Mizbeach. Oh, so they have the picture over there. Okay, so the Brayse will now say the spot of the Mizbeach itself, Whose chelek was that in? So the Gemara says as follows: Urutzua haisayaitzis mechelke shel Yehuda. There was a strip of land that went out from the chelek of Yehuda, v'nichneses bechelke shel Binyamin, and it would go into the portion of where Binyamin was. Uba mizbeach banoi, and there the mizbeach was built. And v'haya Binyamin atzadik mitztayir aleh b'chol yom lebayla. And Binyamin had a tremendous pain. In other words, he had a tremendous yearning to swallow up this piece of territory. He wanted that the mizbeach should be in his territory. Shenema, the pasuk says, "Chayfif olav kol hayom." Chayfif olav kol hayom over here, Rashi says, means that like a person that has tsar and he scratches himself and he's like uncomfortable with himself. He had such tsar, he really wanted that the mizbeach should be in his portion as well. Because of this tremendous shukah that he wanted this that it should be in his chelek, so he was zeichev and nasish bezichin l'shchina. So he became a host for the shchina, and the kodesh HaKadoshim was in his chelek. So if you look over there in the pictures that Gemara has, so really what happened was the chelek of Yehuda is there's a strip that goes in on one side of the mizbeach, on the east part of the mizbeach, and on the bottom part of the mizbeach. Over there's the chelek of Yehuda. But on the other parts of the Mizbeach, it was actually the Chelek of Binyamin. And the Mizbeach, between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, was also the Chelek of Binyamin. But there was a strip of land from Yehuda that went in to two sides of the Mizbeach, that also Yehuda had a certain Chelek over there in the portion of the Mizbeach. What's the point of here from this Braise? So we see that they say that the place of the Beis HaMikdash was divided between Yehuda and Binyamin. So if the place of the Beis HaMikdash was divided between them, so that means that Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash was divided for the Shvatim. That's one opinion. And the following Tana here in this next Braisa Savar, he holds Loinis Chalka Yerushalayim l'Shvatim. Yerushalayim was not divided for the Shvatim. Tanya will learn in the Braisa Ein Maskirim Bottom Yerushalayim. You can't rent out houses in Yerushalayim. The people that came up, the Oile Regel. So you make a business, a very good business. You have houses and you rent it out for them for the time when they're Oile Regel. So the Braisa says you can't do that. Yerushalayim does not belong to anybody. It was not given to any shevet, and therefore it doesn't belong to you. Even if you're living there as a permanent resident, Yerushalayim belongs to all the Klal Yisrael. So you can't rent anything out. Rabbi Lazar says, Afloi mitos. Even the beds, which are movable items, you also can't rent out as well. Why? Because even though the bed itself does belong to you, but every bed has to have the ground that it sits on, that it lies on. So therefore, you can't rent it out. Where are you putting your bed? Mid-air. So therefore, you can't rent out anything in Yerushalayim. But the Braisa finishes off, in the end of the day, though, this is how Taisus explains this Indian here, in the end of the day, you are giving the bed for the person to sleep on. So even if the territory itself is not yours to rent out, but the actual bed does belong to you. So the person is benefiting from you. So therefore, lefichach, ayres kachim, the hides of the kachim that they brought, all the karbanis, and then they had the hides that was very valuable. What did they do with them? Bali ushpizin neitel neisam bezraya. The hosts, the people that lived in Yerushalayim, that would host all the Yidden there, they would grab it, they would keep it for themselves, because in the end of the day, they did give place for these people to be there. So here you see, this is the Tana that holds that Yerushalayim was not divided for the Shvatim. Abaye concludes another point here, based on this Braise. Shmami know from here we see that it's the custom of the land, it's the custom of people, that when a person is hosted by somebody, so then you should leave over something for him. So you leave over a gulfa or mashcheb or shpiza. So you leave over a kankan shalcheres, Rashi says, some kind of a earthenware jug, or a mashche, or the hide of the animal. Leave over something for your host. That he hosted you, so leave him something. So this is the custom of the land, like you see the people in Yerushalayim did. Going back to the halacha of the Mishnah. What was the halacha of the Mishnah? When you sell something, so you always have to use that money for something that was holier than what it was before. So now Rava qualifies this. It's not always the case. Lo Ishanu, the halacha of the Mishnah wasn't said. Elo shalei machru shiva tuvia ir b'maymed an shiur. That's only if this sale was sort of not a full sale. Why wasn't it a full sale? Because there were the shiva tuvia ir. Shiva tuvia ir are those leaders of the city. 7 people that are appointed as caretakers, as the leaders of the city. So if this shul, for example, was sold not in the presence of those Shiva Tuvia, those leaders of the city, and also not in the presence of all the other people of the city, so you don't sort of have the full agreement of everybody to sell it. So then the money of this shul that was sold retains the kedusha of the shul, and therefore you have to use that money for something that's going to be holier. And Rashi actually adds another point as well, that it's not only the money that retains the Kedusha, it's actually even the shul itself that was sold. Because it wasn't sold in the presence of all the people of the city and by the agreement, full agreement of all the leaders of the city, so even the shul itself also retains Kedusha, and it can only be used in a holy way. But if you sell a shul in the presence of all the people of the city and with the agreement of the leaders of the city, so then it's a full sale. So then you can use the money, and also the shul itself, you can use money even to buy beer, to drink beer with it. The money does not retain any of the holiness. It can be used for anything.
A big shul in a big city also.
So yeah, 1 second. Yeah, to the shaper dami, you can be used it. It's okay. It's okay to go and use it even to buy beer with it. Well, if it's a shul in a big city, you're not allowed to sell it, like the Gemara said before, right? If it's in a big city that many people come to, you're not allowed to sell it in the first place. Here we're talking about a shul that's allowed to be sold. So the Gemara. So here I'm giving the example of a shul, but the same thing is also going to get to the other things that it mentioned in the Mishnah. But obviously, a Sefer Torah, a Sfarim, you can't say that after you sell Sefer Torah and Sfarim, that the Sefer Torah and the Sfarim loses its Kedusha. It doesn't lose its Kedusha. But a Sefer Torah or even an Aron Kodesh, if it's fully sold with everybody's agreement, so then the money loses the Kedusha, and even the shul itself, the Aron also loses its Kedusha. So the Gemara, Ravina Havele Hahu Tila de Beknishta. Ravina had an area there where there was an old shul that collapsed there, and it was the rubbles of a shul, and he wanted to use that place to plant over there. Asla Kamed Rav Ashi came to Rav Ashi and asked him, Amalei Ma'ul Mizre, could I use this area to plant there? Amalei Zil Zavne Mishivet Tuviyeh b'mayim b'dan shiur. If you're going to want to use it for your own private use, so you're going to have to buy it from the 7 leaders of the city in the presence of all the people of the city, so it should be a full sale, v'zara, and then you can go ahead and plant it. Rami bar Abba Havaka Bani Beknishta. Rami bar Abba was building a shul. Havahi Beknishta Atika. There was another old shul in the city. So Havabai Lemistere, he wanted to demolish the older shul, Ulasuya Livni Ukshuri Minay, and bring the bricks and the beams from the old shul, Viyuli Lahasam, and to come and bring it into the new shul, to build the new shul. So Yosef Rav Chisda, so he asked a question regarding this that Rav Chisda once said about demolishing a shul. Rav Chisda said, you're not allowed to demolish one shul at the Bani Beknishta Achriti until you first build the new shul. So now, what was his question? So no, he clearly said, you're not allowed to demolish an old shul for the purpose of a new shul. But his question was, Hasa Mishum Pshiyasa. Over there, maybe the reason why he said that's not allowed, because we're afraid of negligence. First, they'll demolish the old shul, and they didn't yet collect the money. They don't necessarily have the means to build the new shul, and they might never end up building the new shul. But the question he asked was, Ki haigavna mai. But over here, in this situation where he's already building the new shul, and he's just using the bricks of the old shul for the new shul, maybe in such a situation we're not concerned of a negligence and it's allowed. He asked Rav Papa about this vasale, and he said, no, it's not allowed. You first have to build a new shul. He asked Rav Hona this question, and and he also said that it's not allowed. Rava said, Hi Beknishte, when you have a shul, chilufa uzevune shari. So you're allowed to exchange the shul for something else, for another item, and the zvuna, or to sell the shul, is also allowed. But agure or mashkaine, but to rent out the area of a shul for someone's private use, or mashkaine, to use a shul as a mashkin, as collateral for a loan, ostra, that's not allowed. My time, what's the reason? It still has its kedusha. Once, if you didn't sell it off, or you didn't exchange the kedusha for something else, when you sell it, so then the kedusha could be chal on the other item that you sold it for, or on the money. But if it still has its kedusha, you can't just use it as a rental for private use or as a collateral. Livni nami, the bricks of a shul, chilufinu vizavoninu, to exchange it for something else or to sell it, shari, that's allowed. Oizfinu aser, but to lend it out for use, for private use, that's not allowed. Dr. Gemara, Hani Mili Ba'tikta. This is when you're talking about bricks that are old, meaning it was already used in a shul. It was built into a shul already. So that has already the kedusha of the shul. Aval B'chadete, if it's brand new bricks that were designated for a shul, but it wasn't used yet for the shul, less lamba. Then that could be used for private use. And the Gemara explains the chiddush of this. This is true even according to the opinion that says Hazmana milsihi. Once I designate something for a certain holy purpose, it already gets the status of what I designated it for. So the Gemara says, but here, when I designate bricks for a shul, it does not get the status of the shul. And the Gemara explains, when do I say that when I designate, it gets the status of what I designated it for? If your person is prepared, the garments, the shrouds, the tachrichim that you need for a mess, so then it has the halacha that it's designated for the mess and it can't be used for anything else. Aval hacha, but over here, when you have these bricks that are designated for the shul, kitavi la'arig dami. So over here, it's like a person that spun wool that's then afterwards going to be woven into a garment. So in other words, it's an earlier stage in the preparation of it, and it's not like this garment that was made for the mess that's just ready to use as is. So the same thing with the bricks that were not used yet, so that it has to then be built into the shul, and then the shul will be used as a shul. So therefore, it's an earlier stage, and therefore it doesn't have the kedusha of the shul yet. So the Gemara. This is the conclusion of the inyan. Over here, nobody will say that the designation of these bricks already have the kedusha of the shul. So are you allowed to give a shul if the people of the city decided they want to give the shul as a matana to someone, and he's going to use it for mundane purpose? Pligi bar Ravacha and Ravina argue about this. Chad osar, one says it's not allowed. V'chad shari, and one says it's allowed. Manda osar, the one that says that it's not allowed. Bahai tifka kedushasa. You're giving it as a gift. You're not even making it possible that the kedusha of the shul should be able to go over to money or something else, that it should be exchanged with something else. You're just giving it away as a gift. And one that says that it is allowed says, no, it is an exchange for something. What is that something? If not for the fact that they had benefit from this person, that they're giving him this gift, they would have never given him this gift. So havale matane kizvini. So therefore, this matane is not just a matane; it's similar to a sale. It's an exchange for the hana, for the gift, for what this person has done. Tashmishe mitzvah. When you have things that were used for a mitzvah, nizraken, they can be thrown out after the mitzvah is done. Tashmishe kedusha, things that are used for kedusha, they have a status of kedusha. The Gemara will explain what we're talking about. Nignozen, when they're not useful anymore, you have to genize it. You have to go and bury it in the ground. These are the tashmisha mitzvah, a sukkah, the boards of a sukkah, or the schach of a sukkah, or a lulav, shayfer, tzitzis. So all of these, after they can't be used as a mitzvah anymore, they can be thrown out. The following are tashmisha kedusha, duluskimi svarim. When you have some kind of a case that's used for svarim, for a sefer Torah or for svarim, tefillin and also tefillin and mezuzahs, and the case that's used for tefillin and mezuzahs, and the tik shel sefer Torah, and the case for a sefer Torah, the nartik shel tefillin, the case or the baitel, or the place where you put in the tefillin inside, or the tzuei sein, and also the tzuis of the tefillin as well. So these things are tashmish of kedusha. They have kedusha in it, and therefore, if you can't use them anymore, you have to bury it. So Rava said, Meireish hava mineh. In the beginning, I thought to say, Hai kursaya, the bima in the shul where you read in the sefer Torah, tashmish de tashmishu. It's not considered to be something which is used directly from the sefer Torah, but it's used indirectly. Why? Because when you use the sefer Torah, when you use the bima, you always put a cover over the bima before you use it. So therefore, it's not being used directly, and therefore v'shari, it's allowed. You're allowed afterwards, if it's not useful anymore for the sefer Torah, you're allowed to use it afterwards for your own private use. But given the chazina, once I saw the Maisvi Alavei Sefer Torah, that sometimes they do put the Sefer Torah on it without any cover, Amineh Tashmish Kedushahu. So I said that it does directly serve the Sefer Torah, and therefore has this status of Tashmish Kedusha, that it could never be used for your own mundane use. V'asar. Omar Rava, similar Rava said, Mereish Avamin, in the beginning I said, Hi Prisa. This, the Prisa is the by the Aron Kodesh, when you have the Pareiches for the Aron Kodesh. So it's interesting. Rashi actually says that the pareiches for the Aron Kodesh is put inside the Aron Kodesh. After you open the doors of the Aron Kodesh, inside the Aron Kodesh, before the Sefer Torah, you have there's some shuls that still do it like that today. Right? But Taisus over here says, like our minig, that the pareiches of the Aron Kodesh is outside of the Aron Kodesh. So in the beginning, Rava said, I said, tashmish did tashmishu. This is a use for something else that's being used to contain the Sefer Torah in it. So it's not directly being used for the Sefer Torah. What's the pareiches for? Simply the pareiches is there for the honor of the Aron Kodesh. And then the Aron Kodesh is to contain the Sefer Torah in it. But kivin the chazina, but then I once saw the Aifile umanche Sefer Alavei, that they spread it out and they put the Sefer Torah itself in this pareiches. So I'm in a tashmish kedushus. I said now I see that it's actually used for the Sefer Torah itself, and therefore you're not allowed to ever use it for mundane use.
If it's inside, you're not allowed.
Well, it's Rashi and Taisus is pshat, but according to either pshat, he's saying that he saw that sometimes it's used for to wrap the Sefer Torah or itself in it. Maybe not. Okay, so could be it's different today. Rava said, "Hi tevoise the irfat. If you have Aron Kodesh that got ruined, it got misshaped, and you're not using it anymore. So what do you do with it? Mevde teve zutrisi. So you have to make out of it a smaller Aron Kodesh to be used for. So shari, that's allowed. But kursaye aser. If you want to take the boards of a Aron Kodesh and you can't use it for Aron Kodesh anymore, now you want to make a bima out of it, you're not allowed because you're going down a level of kedusha. And Rava said, "Hi prise de bala." What happens if you have the pareiches of the Aron Kodesh that is not anymore good for use? So lemav de prise lesifri, to use this to cover the Sfarim, the Sefer Torah, that's shari, that's allowed. L'chumashin, to use it to cover chumashin, asr, that's not allowed. You're going down a level of kedusha. Rava said, Hani zvili de chumshi, these cases that are used to hold chumashim in it. V'kamtari the sifri, or also boxes, some kind of boxes that are used for Sefer Torah. Tashmish kedusha ninu, these have a status of use for things that are holy, and we said before, v'nignazen, they have to be put away, they have to be hidden. You can't ever use it for private use. So the Gemara Pshita, isn't this obvious? That used for Sefer Torah, for Svarim. I would think, Hani lav l'kavod avidan. When you store it in them, it's not made for the honor of the Sefer Torah or for the honor of the Svarim. It's just made as protection, a storage of protection, but not for its honor. So I would think that it does not have that level of Kedusha. That's why he's teaching me that it does have this level of Kedusha. There was this shul of Roman Yidden, the have a pasuk la'huidruna, and this shul was open. The room of the shul itself was open to another room, which was made for people that passed away, that they kept them there. The have a machas bei meis, and there was a body of a dead person that was there in that shul, open to the main shul. The door was open to the main shul. And the Kainim wanted to come in to daven in this shul. So when you have the door open from one room to another, the tumah travels through the doorway to come into the shul. So how are the Kainim going to enter? Also, Amr Leila Rava, they came and told Rava about this. Amalu, Rava told them, Dalu to Yufte, so Tevaisa that is, pick up the Aron Kodesh, and Eisvua, and put it down over there by that entranceway to block, that the tumah shouldn't come in. Why would that help? How is it a good chatzitza? Is the Aron Kodesh a good chatzitza? So he says yes. Because this is a keli, or a wooden keli which is heavy, and it's made to always stay in one position. And the kli'etz also lenachas, a keli that's heavy, that's large enough, that's made to stay in one place. And mekabel tumah, it's not susceptible to any tumah. And the chaytzis b'fnei tumah, and it also stops the tumah, and therefore the tumah of that room will not come into the shul, and the kainim could enter. But the Rabbanan said to Rava, this is not a good idea, because sometimes when the Sefer Torah is in it, they move it around from one place to another. And if so, this is something that's moved, even full or empty, and therefore it's not something which will be chaytzis for the tumah. It could be mekabel tumah, and it's not going to separate the tumah. So therefore, you can't do this. It's not possible to separate the tumah in this way. Mazutra said, when you have the mantle of a Sefer Torah that was withering and it can't be used anymore, you use it for tachrichin, for a meis mitzvah. And that's how you bury it in the ground. Rava said, Sefer Torah Shabala, a Sefer Torah that is not useful anymore, the words can't be read from it, it's not, okay, so what do you do with it? Gainz in Isa, you have to bury it in the ground. Eitzel Talmud Chacham, near a Talmud Chacham. Who's a Talmud Chacham? Bafil Shayna halachas. Even someone that just learns the halachas of Mishnah and Braise, he's already called a Talmud Chacham. Amar Avacha Bayakiv ubekli cheres. It has to be buried in an earthenware keli. Shenam, as the pasuk says, v'nasatem v'kli cheres. You place it in an earthenware keli that stores it in a way that l'mayan yomim rabim, that it could last there for many, many years. So that's the way you bury a Sefer Torah if it's necessary.